the next speaker. I'll give myself as much time as needed. Hi, so this is joint work with Fruta Meta, Ioannis Panagias, who's somewhere around here, and Prasad Tetali and Vijay Vajrayani. All right. So this is a talk about evolution. So we start with an aphorism from Charles Darwin, and just to paraphrase him, some species live and some species die, and it's all in the details, right? And okay, this is like a nice quote, but already, if we think of the most known datum about evolution, the survival of the fittest, this is not quite clear why that happens, right? So evolution, effectively through natural selection, seems to promise to produce increasingly better adapted populations, okay? So then why do species die? So what are the processes that actually lead to extinction? And if there's something that leads to extinction, what can actually counterbalance this force, okay? And so in this talk, we'll focus on two mechanisms. So the mechanism that leads to extinction is that the change of the environment, okay? So a trait that used to be good is now bad, is now lethal due to a change in the environment. Like think of the moth example, right? And the way out of this mess is through mutations. So mutations effectively force exploration of suboptimal solutions, and hopefully, as we'll see, can help the population recover fast. All right. So to make this definition, the discussion a bit formal, here's some basic definitions. So gene is the basic hereditary unit, okay? And it happens to be located along a chromosome, and locus is the actual location of this gene. And allele is the basic information that the gene captures. So a gene can come in many different alleles. For example, different alleles control result to different eye colors, okay? And the genotype of an organism is just the genetic ID. And given your genotype, a specific phenotype is somehow realized, which is just the set of traits of the individual. Okay, now human beings, we have 2 copies of each chromosome, but simpler creatures like bacteria have only 1 copy. Okay, these are called haploids. Right? So this is the basic lingo. And here's the simplest setting. Okay, so we have a haploid species that reproduces sexually without any mutation. Right? In these cases, we have exactly 2 genes, gene X and gene Y, and the first gene has n possibilities, whereas the second one has m possibilities. And once we put 2 of these genes together, 2 of these alleles together, we create a genotype that's an individual. And let Wij denote the fitness of this individual. And we like to keep track of the frequencies, let's say, of the different alleles. Let's say what percentage of the population has the gene that leads to brown eyes versus green eyes, and so on and so forth. So when 2 individuals actually mate, they effectively do this mixing. And these are the 4 possible combinations that you can get. And the actual numbers of the offsprings are actually reflective of their respective fitnesses. Okay? So then, if you actually do this fully panmictic mixing, then the actual frequencies of the different alleles change according to this rule. And the only thing that actually I want you to keep in mind about this rule is that it's actually nonlinear. Okay, so this is a complex dynamic. All right. So Chastain et al. Gave a very nice game theoretic interpretation for this setting. It says effectively, you should think of it as a 2-player coordination game, where both agents update a mixed strategy according to multiplicative weight updates. Okay, so the first gene is one agent, the second gene is the other agent. The frequencies are actually mixed strategies. And given any specific strategy, which is 2 genes coming together to create an individual, the common fitness of the fitness of that individual is the common utility for both agents. Okay? And this weird, somehow non-linear dynamic is just a multiplicative weight update hiding. All right? So what do we know about multiplicative weight update in this setting? Well, we know that it will converge to pure Nash equilibria for these games. So pure Nash equilibria are things like local optima of this fitness matrix. So for example, here you have 2 different local optima, 1.1 and 1.3. And if you start, let's say, with this initial condition and you start running the dynamics, you see that after maybe a few iterations, it almost has converged. The system has converged to one of the 2 local optima. Okay? And I want to point out that you don't actually have to converge to the absolute global optimum. Okay, you can converge to any of these like local optima, but typically we assume that all of these local optima are like good enough. For example, they're like higher than 1, so that they lead to exponential increase of the population. Okay, so this thing is good. The problem comes with this, like a change on the actual fitness matrix. So now a specific combination that used to be good is now lethal, right? Because now it leads to like exponential decrease of the population. Okay. So in order to understand this, we have to go a little bit more advanced in our like mathematical modeling. So these are like 2 different variants of the original model. So the first one, it's a noisy extension of multiplicative weights, where we actually introduce some small random noise. Okay, so like a small perturbation on the actual frequencies. You can think of it as sort of like capturing sampling errors due to having like an underlying finite versus an infinite population. Okay, and the critical assumption here is that we actually like force, like if the proportion of some alleles becomes like very, very small, smaller than delta, like 0.00001, then we just say that like, okay, we just zero it out. So you cannot get like infinitesimal small fractions of the population. At some point, like you don't have any individuals of that gene, okay? Okay, now the second extension is that we actually allow for mutations. So mutations effectively means that like, okay, that the frequencies of any sort of like allele never really zeroes out, because there's always a mutation step that somehow like chooses with probability t at random to mutate to one of the other possible alleles. Okay, and if you do this simple math, this is the new sort of like updated form. And we're also like gonna keep track of the total population size by just, and we'll assume in a very standard way that this actually grows or shrinks multiplicatively according to the mean population fitness. Okay, so you have some initial population, let's say 100. You know, if the mean fitness is 1.1, this will increase exponentially or decrease exponentially, right? All right. So this means, so we've described the dynamics. Now, how about modeling the changing environment? Okay. So here we actually use a model that was introduced by Wolf, Vazirani, and Arkin that effectively says, okay, the environment evolves according to like a Markov chain. Okay. So with probability 1 minus p, we stay at the current state. And with probability p, we just choose one of your neighbors uniformly at random, and you migrate to that state. Right? Now, in order to make the discussion about survival interesting, we have to make the setting a bit tough. Okay, so the first of like assumption is that there exist no all-weather phenotypes. So for example, like if you fix a specific like individual and you just force it to just go through all of these cycles, then eventually it will just die. Okay. So if you, and this is what the mathematical somehow, this mathematical relationship encodes, okay? So there's no easy survival in our setting, okay? And the second one is that like in every environment, we have at least one good allele and possibly at most a few really, really bad ones, okay? So what's the definition of a good allele? Something that the average fitness, okay, if your opponent somehow is choosing mixed strategy uniformly at random, should be greater than 1, okay? So there should be some way to grow. Okay, and really bad alleles are alleles that somehow are point-wise dominated by good allele. So typically, there can be like very, very few of these in sort of like practical sort of like fitness matrices, and we sort of like also allow this in our model. All right, and this is the informal description of our results. First of all, we actually provably show that mutations indeed assist with the survival in a very specific way. Okay, we show that like without survival, the system sort of like dies out, whereas with survival, for specific rates that I'll make exact in the following slide, survival happens with positive probability, okay? And the way we sort of like build towards these results with these other interesting sort of like stepping stones. So first of all, we show that like the mutation-free dynamics don't actually fixate or, in a given environment, in a fixed environment. They fixate actually fast to the pure equilibria, okay? And furthermore, that when we have mutations, we still have convergence in a static environment, no matter how high actually the mutation rate is, okay? Now the system no longer converges to equilibria of the underlying game because of this mutation, and moreover, the fitness is not always increasing. So the proof is actually significantly more complicated, but still convergence is guaranteed, no matter for the mutation rates, all right? The more technical results are here. Okay, I think the only thing that maybe I want to like point out to your attention is that like the actual sort of like Lyapunov function that drives the convergence for the dynamics with mutation is a very interesting somehow hybrid between the mean fitness, which is the first term, and the second term, which is effectively a notion of entropy. So it's either effectively the mean fitness goes up, as I would want, or the population effectively becomes more mixed. But it's actually this product, this combination of the two, that always goes up. Okay? And there are a bunch of interesting ideas going on about proving these things that has to do with actually robust extensions of Lyapunov theory and even connections with statistical estimation for Markov processes, but I don't have any sort of like time to get into the real sort of like details of this. Just look at the paper. But instead I want to point out like a very interesting sort of like, I think, follow-up work that says like, what if the evolving environment is not exogenous, but it's endogenous? So I co-evolve against like a predator. It's a prey predator or a host parasite. So in an interesting sort of like, I think, follow-up work with Leonard Schulman, we can actually show that a specific class of such dynamics is actually always periodic. And the proof here actually comes purely from physics. So you can show that like there are formal connections between this class of systems and actually things like Hamiltonian dynamics. Okay? So there's a lot of like very interesting sort of like deep connections that bring together, information and energy and learning in games. All right. So that's my talk, and thank you for your attention. All right. Any questions? All right. That's easy enough. Oh, thank you, and time for the next speaker.